I'm critical of Bubble because I love Bubble and I want the best for them. I do think they're falling behind just because the space is moving so quickly and there are so many different avenues and customers that they need to deal with. They're in a very interesting stage right now. They're leaving 7 years or whatever of bootstrap mentality, small teams, only focus on product towards $100 million VC backed system where they need to grow fast and make a lot of revenue. And I think they're struggling with that transition.
Today I'm speaking with JJ Englert. JJ is one of those guys who leaves you scratching your head because you just can't understand how he can get so many things done so quickly. He seems to be everywhere all at once. He's the head of product and engineering at a venture-backed startup, an instructor at Build Camp, a manager of his own no-code community, a husband, and a father of 2 young kids. No matter which social platform you're on, he always seems to be near the top of the feed, sharing his insights about business, life, and the no-code space. Together we discuss his best hacks for productivity, the current state of the no-code landscape, and some of the unique challenges facing Bubble as a big player in this space. All of JJ's links are in the description below, and I'd highly recommend keeping up with him on Twitter if you're not already. Without further ado, here's JJ. Enjoy the conversation. I want to start with something that you tweeted recently. You said, performing at a high level each day doesn't just happen. Many things need to align in order for you to actually reach your peak performance on a consistent basis. For me, it's a combination of all the following, and you go on to list 6 different areas and have a little blurb about each exactly. There were a few in there: sleep, exercise, diet, and mental health. And my first question for you is, which one of those areas do you find the hardest to keep up with? Or which one of them do you find yourself sacrificing for whatever else you want to do?
Yeah, it's definitely sleep. I have 2 little kids, a 4-month-old, a 3-year-old. Sleep is really hard to come by, and it's very inconsistent. And it's honestly out of my control for the most part, right? Like, you never know when they're going to wake up, etc. So sleep is really hard for me. It's always been hard for me, especially with having children in the last 3 years. But it's just something that I've learned to overcome in the sense of, some nights I might just not sleep well. And so instead of going to the gym on that day, I'll take a nap. Or, I'll find ways to get extra sleep or go to bed early the next night to make up for it, understanding my body and what its needs are, and just constantly going with that flow.
Nice, I like that. And just in general, how do you try to balance? I mean, you kind of listed a tip right there for balancing between these areas, but do you have any other tips for trying to achieve balance in life? Do you think such a thing is possible?
Yeah, balance is a hard thing, right? It's a living, breathing thing that's always changing. I'm personally still trying to find my balance. I'm lucky in the sense that I have a lot of opportunities at my disposal and I want to do them all, but it would not be a balanced approach to do them all, right? And so you need to find what works for you in your life. And it's different for everybody. Like right now I'm in my family building, growing stage where I have these young ones that I want to be around. I want to help, raise them and grow them, et cetera. And so that means, that I need to limit my time working outside of work. But at the same time, I also have a lot of professional ambitions that I want to do and achieve myself, right? And so I think a lot of that is just making every moment count. And it also just includes having really long days, right? Like, I'll get up at 6 with the kids and I'll be with them until 9. I start work at 9. I work out on my lunch break, and then right after I'm done working at like 5:30. I'll make dinner for us all, and then we'll have a nice dinner, and then we'll put the kids down around 8 o'clock, and then at that point I'll either go back to my side projects or work or watch something with my wife, and we try to rotate that. So try to do no more than 3 nights of work each week. So that way we still have a healthy balance of being with each other, because at the same time, being married, that is also something that you need to work on. It's not just a given. It's not just there because you agreed many years ago to be together. It's something that you need to consistently work on. And that's also something that I found out. Like, I'm lucky to have a really good marriage, but, being so consumed in my work and everything else for some time, you often lose sight of that. And just like, well, we all also need to work on each other. So there's a hard thing. And I'm constantly trying to find it myself.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that could have made the list too. Just marriage, relationships
in general. Yeah. It's a big part, and like, having a steady relationship is kind of like having a steady job where that drama is not in your life anymore. You don't need to worry about that. That's one less thing, right? So like that's why I love working full time is having that steady job allows me to remove any kind of like outs outside pressures and or when I'm going to find the next freelance client. When am I like? What is this client going to say? Are they going to ping me at 9 o'clock at night? All that kind of stuff. It just allows me to focus 9 to 5 and crush it, and then it reserves capacity for me to do all my external stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I noticed when I was freelancing too that it was just way too easy um, to just let your schedule get out of control. Where I'd be like up, it was too easy for me to establish some really bad habits around working hours. And there is something. It's still hard for me to do. I do kind of like working at or evenings or splitting up my time, but that separation between the two that you speak of is nice. In general, I've noticed that you make a lot of inspirational posts where you talk about things like setting and achieving goals and living your best life. And I'm wondering I guess, like, if you had to pick one book that's had the biggest impact on the way you think, or maybe a person who's influenced your way of thinking when it comes to like productivity. I hate the word self-help, but let's use it. Who are your influences? What's one book that's really impacted the way that you think in this area?
I can't really contribute it to a book. I would love to, but it wouldn't be real. I think the biggest influence that I'm following is an influencer in another space that I've come up with. His name is Jacob Owens. He's a really big film influencer. And when I worked with him in the film industry, we started from ground zero together. And, throughout 5 years of working together, he built a YouTube channel of over 800,000 following. He had his Instagrams at like 150,000. He has like 10 different businesses. And he's also like owns a lot of real estate and whatnot. And so I was his producer and he was the director for many, many projects, right? And I got to see how he went about building this lifestyle and managing many assets and also building an audience, what worked, what didn't, his approach to it. And I was able to, like, by working with him so closely on a daily basis, figure out kind of what worked and what I wanted to take and what I didn't want to take and what I wanted to do for my own style, right? And so I think the biggest, and then I just applied it to this industry and in the way that I wanted to, right? And so I'm still trying to figure it out. The most important thing for me is like, I'm being genuine and true to myself. Like I don't want to get to the point where, I'm selling likes or, selling stuff like that, right? That I don't believe in. But I think it also comes down to like, in order to do a lot of things, you need to be able to get through a lot of things quickly and to essentially cut losses when they're losses, and I think an example of that is one of my first apps that I built, Jump Studios, right? It's a fantastic app. I've really enjoyed building it and do enjoy building it. But the fact of the matter is I've built it for over a year. It brings in very little revenue. And I hate marketing and sales, and that's the thing it needs most, right? And so at some point I just decided to stop working on it because the opportunity cost for that was so low compared to everything else that I could be doing, right? And it's like looking at those things in life, like where is area or fat that I can cut out of my daily life. Like, for example, when I go to the gym, I have 10 different pairs of the same gym outfit that I wear each day, right? So when I go to the gym, I don't really make a choice of what I'm wearing that day. That choice is already made for me. My breakfast diet, like my breakfast meals, my shakes, my post lunch meal, that's already decided for me. I don't need to really like search and think about what am I eating, right? So I know like what my body needs to excel, and I have kind of like a rotation of those things just right there stocked in my cabinet. And then we also have a meal service. We use HelloFresh where they prepare everything for you, and we just pick what we want to do, and we just make it that night, right? And then finally, what I wear to work each day is like 2 weeks of my no-coat attire. It's all black on black because black is my work attire, right? Like when I put on black, it's my uniform. That's where I mentally get into the mind space of like I'm ready for work, right? And that's hard to do when you're working from home because I'm just in the next room over. I have 2 kids sometimes screaming, right? And I need to like really perform at a high level. And so things that I do like that, like things like that I do to systematize and to reduce some of the decisions that I'm making each day help me kind of really stay focused on the more important things at hand.
Nice. I like that. Let's talk about Bubble. So I was I was watching that talk that you did with the guys from Xano, and you guys were speaking about using Xano in combination with Bubble, just to basically deal with large data sets, and to make that whole all of the different things that you want to do with large data sets faster. It's no secret that it's an area where Bubble really struggles. And there was a question near the end that was asked that I thought was really interesting. Someone asked whether there was something fundamental about the way Bubble was built that makes it slow when handling large amounts of data. And the one thing that the guy who you were talking with from Xano mentioned in his answer was that, one thing that he mentioned was that Bubble was built quite some time ago, and that the real innovation in this space happened more on the front end, so giving us this canvas that we can build apps quickly on. And as a result of that, that a lot of the work that maybe could have been done on the back end started to suffer and lag behind. And also, again, just the space moves so fast, technologies evolve so fast that, they've been around for a very long time, and I'm sure that they built this underlying architecture of their whole product that it's trickier to move fast once that's already built. So I'm curious, one, do you agree with that analysis? Do you think there's some truth to that?
Yeah, I certainly do. And I think it also stems from the fact that they didn't build for enterprise users like us, right? Like they built for just people that wanted to build really cool no-code apps, which you could totally do. But they didn't build specifically for enterprise use cases and HIPAA compliant and all these things that you need to, do CRUD operations at really high speeds, at really big volumes. It wasn't built for that, And so while it can do a lot of that, it does struggle in those areas at really big quantities of data.
Another, like a few hours ago too, there was a tweet from Gregory John from BuildCamp. And he said, "I've been a hardcore Bubble advocate for a long time and always will be. That said, for the first time in years, a new no-code product has grabbed my attention and it's completely flying under the radar." He it was frustrating, he didn't tell us what that no-code product was that he was talking about. But, your talk with Xano, and this is not anything new. You see people talking about different alternatives to Bubble all the time. My question for you is, do you think Bubble is falling behind to some of these other companies now that this no-code space is evolving and new players are coming into the scene? And if they are, will they be able to catch up and kind of be that huge gorilla in the space that they've been maybe up until this point, you could argue?
Yeah, I actually just spoke with someone at Bubble about this today. I do think they're falling behind just because the space is moving so quickly and there are so many different avenues and customers that they need to deal with, right? And also, Bubble is such a big full stack platform that they can't exponentially get better at everything overnight. They're also scaling, learning how to scale, right? I think they're making really good improvements, and what you have today will probably be 3 times better in a year from now, right? But for those that are building in the enterprise world that need these enterprise features now, sometimes this is just not the best platform for them and or the best full stack, right? Like we need to start being open to the idea of expanding our stacks and having more of a hybrid approach because Bubble's good at a lot of things and we still want to take advantage of those things, but we don't want to limit ourselves to their disadvantages as well. We want to turn those disadvantages into advantages for us and our business. And so that's up to you to figure out where that comes into your build and your use case. During our Xano talk, we specifically said, you'll know when this happens when you start to feel the pain, right? I was at my previous startup where I was a full-time developer. We had a workflow that would run, I think, for like 3 days straight, right? That's pain. You don't want that, right? That's when you export that thing into a new system that is highly built to run operations such as that, right? And then you run everything else still in Bubble. Everything else was perfect in Bubble. But it was that one system that we needed to run every single month took 3 days. And it's like at that point, that's pain. Look towards a solution that is built specifically to accommodate or tackle those things that you need.
Yeah, do you think that's just like they've kind of picked an impossible approach to this problem of democratizing web development, let's say, in the way that they're combining the front end and back end in the way that they do? I was reading this this article on WeWeb's blog, which is a competitor, and their approach to it is more traditional in the sense that they provide this front end builder and are completely agnostic to whatever back end you want to use. So they basically take Bubble but leave the back end up to you. And in this article, they were talking about the different philosophies there, like how Bubble combines things and how they've left that split up. Do you think that part of it is just like the problem in the way that Bubble's approaching it? Do you think they'll ever be able to get there and truly beat out these other systems that are separating the two in a more traditional way?
Yeah, I think they might, but it's not going to happen overnight. And in order to keep the enterprise users, they need to allow for more collaboration within the ecosystem and to really open that up. I think about this more so like Amazon, right? Like Amazon took many years to build this marketplace that is really, really good. They started with allowing all these merchants to come in, right? But eventually they're now building essentially the white labeled version of all the best selling products, right? Given that insight. And they didn't start by doing that. They started by allowing everyone to come in. They saw what worked, and then they built what was working in that way. And now most of the time when you're buying, sometimes you're just buying from Amazon directly, and it's the white label product and not the merchant products. I think that's what Bubble needs to do. They already have a good ecosystem, but they haven't given love to it in many, many years. They also need to be more friendly to players like Zeno to build native SDK integrations, all that kind of stuff to make partnering with those external players easier. And so the goal for Bubble is to never make you feel locked in. Because if you feel locked in, you're not going to get started. The goal for Bubble, in my eyes, is to always allow the developer to feel like I could move my stack however I need to, which is then my business, navigate my business however I need to at any time. But I'm always going to choose Bubble because it's the best performance. That's the goal that they need to choose. But until they get to that best performance in all areas, which is going to take a while, they need to allow external players. So that way they allow the external players, they could see the insights of who's using what, why they're using it, build solutions specifically that compete with that, bring it into their stack, and eventually I think the roadmap will be a lot more clear of where they need to be from an enterprise standpoint because they have all the insight into, what their members are using for their entire stack.
At what point would you advise someone who's just starting out planning their application to take a hybrid approach from the beginning? And let's say maybe not someone who has an existing enterprise app with tons of data and they know they're going to have a huge data set, but let's just say like someone who's trying to build more of a traditional startup. They're hoping to grow fast like everyone does, and they're expecting to. Would you advise them, if they're really planning and set on having a large number of users and lots of data to deal with, to start out with a hybrid approach? And let's say too that they're not like learning Bubble for the first time, that they have a solid understanding of no-code space and maybe even more traditional software development.
Yeah, I'm currently going through this with my startup that I'm running product and engineering for, Home Pro Pay. So we have a good understanding of where we're going, right? We know how to leverage all of these things, but we're still building 100% natively in Bubble because, again, we're waiting till we feel the pain in order to actually solve that pain, right? And because the advantages of Bubble are still so good, we don't want to dismiss them and add extra work for ourselves and essentially maintain 2 platforms or 3 platforms when we don't need to, right? So this still goes with the approach of launch fast, iterate fast, succeed fast or die fast. And that all includes Bubble being that full stack builder, getting there really quickly. And then as soon as you find your product market fit and you find your success and you start to feel pain with one of those successes, then look outside for, external resources that could help you with that pain point. But I wouldn't recommend it unless, for example, you were building a mobile application that you needed to be native, and then you had a web app that you needed to be native for web too. And so in that case, maybe you go with like a Zeno database, and then you do like a Flutterflow front end for mobile, and then your Bubble front end for your web app, and everything is in your Zeno database. And so like maybe that's like a hybrid approach, so you can get native web apps and native mobile apps and native web apps. Who knows what that stack looks like, but that's also complicated. That slows you down. You probably would just want to build, Bubble's wrap version of that mobile app to test it because that's still the fastest and the fastest way to market. So, it's a complicated question, but I still am very bullish, especially in the startups that are just starting to build entirely on Bubble and don't switch until they feel that pain.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you there too. And like, there's no perfect solution for it. Like you just highlighted, there's always going to be give and take with whatever you decide. Okay. So You're obviously very big in the Bubble community. You've spent a lot of time cultivating your own community in the no code space, and you do like a million different things all over the place. And I know that you've been critical in the past about how Bubble has not done a good enough job of utilizing their own community. Could you just tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I'm critical of Bubble because I love Bubble and I want the best for them, right? I've also invested a lot of my time into Bubble and I want them to have a superior solution because that's where I've invested my time. I want them to win, right? So my criticism doesn't come as negative or hate. It just comes as hopefully a push in the bottom to say, let's keep going, guys. We got a long way to go still, right? With that being said, they're in a very interesting stage right now. They're leaving 7 years or whatever of bootstrap mentality, small teams, only focus on product, towards $100 million VC backed system where they need to grow fast and make a lot of revenue, right? That's a completely different business model that requires completely different teams, operations, everything is completely different. And I think they're struggling with that transition. I think they still only do product well and everything else is not done well at all. I think everything else lacks. And I think that's due to the fact that they haven't, the sole leadership hasn't released enough power into each of the department heads to make their own decisions and to move very quickly and to iterate very fastly to see what's working and what's not, matched with their own ability or lack of ability to hire really quickly to equip these teams at the speed that they need to get up and running. I mean, we see the community manager position, it's still vacant. It's been there for like 6 months, right? I've talked to a lot of people that have gone through that and or have tried to apply to Bubble. And the outstanding response that I've gotten is they take a really long time. They're not very attractive in their compensation offering. And I don't even know if I'm going to be building in Bubble, right? And that's why they want to join Bubble, is to build in Bubble, right? And so I think there's a lot of things that are going wrong there, and they will figure it out. But I got started and I succeeded because of my community. Bubble is really hard to learn. It takes time to get to where I am. And I wouldn't have gotten to where I am without my community. Like, I am a community built bubbler, right? Like, especially me, I have leveraged the community so many ways and now I'm trying to get back to it. But I've had a million people help me get past that roadblock. It really does take a village to build a really, really good Bubble developer, in my opinion. Not only that, but when it comes to freelance projects, that's that professional level, you need to hire those people. You need to work as teams. It becomes bigger than just you, and you need that community to help support those endeavors where it's just where you want to get to, most likely, to build startups, to build teams, etc. Community is so big in all of that, but it's also really laborious. It takes a lot of time to see any kind of return on investment, right? And so I could see why they might be hesitant to do something like that. Again, it just takes a lot of resources. But to my belief, it is the core thing. One of the things why Bubble has succeeded for so many years, it started with their forum. They have really passionate users. They just might not be leveraging them and or pointing all of them in the right direction to succeed in the way that I think they would have a lot of success with.
Yeah, I realized after I asked you that question that that it might sound like I'm crapping on Bubble, but like you, I'm critical of Bubble too because I love them, and obviously my whole career is based around them and around them growing, and it very much feels to me at least like when like a family member does something like frustrating and you want to yell at them and because you want the best for them and because you love them. I feel very much like that whenever Bubble makes a decision that I disagree with. But let's shift and let's talk about what they're doing in a positive way. So like what has been one thing that they've done as a company that you are most stoked about, that you've been most stoked about in maybe like the last year, let's say?
Yeah, it was probably their build in public program. I thought that was a really good approach to getting more people to build publicly and to share their knowledge and to show other people what could be built. That was a program that was short-lived. It was just 8 weeks. I was a participant in it, and I really enjoyed it. I, shared daily, what I was building, how I was building it, all that kind of stuff. And I think that is where they'll continue to find a lot of success because they need a lot of examples of like what can be built in Bubble, and they need a lot of outside support verifying and validating the power of bubble and what could be done and all that kind of stuff, right? And like I think the biggest thing right now is like people look at bubble and they say, yeah, this seems to be really cool, but show me like a really successful business on it, right? And
Yeah, I think part of the challenge there though is that like I would guess that I think they could probably do a better job searching for people who would help showcase bubble built apps, but it seems to me from an outsider's perspective that there are a lot of people who are hesitant to admit that their apps are built on bubble still.
I think the big players do, and why? Because there's no reason to, right? And I think this really stems back to like I think like a year ago, I did like a public letter saying essentially that Bubble needs its own accelerator program to equip these no code founders to build the next unicorn with Bubble. Because eventually there's going to be a unicorn built with no code, and that should be Bubble. But not only that, to give more use case and practical examples of real businesses being built on Bubble, right? And I think that still is true today. They have no control over that pipeline of businesses. So they can't control that narrative, right? And I'm not saying by starting their own accelerator, they're going to have a unicorn overnight because that shit's hard, right? But that will increase their chances. They will also give them firsthand users in those environments that they could deal with or help to navigate what would be better for their tech and what they're going through, right? So really good like test group, etc. And in general, just help to validate that scene. So I think that's a big thing that is lacking in that way, I would say.
What do you think is the biggest thing preventing the no-code space in general from becoming mainstream faster? What do you think that is?
I think the only thing that is stopping it is the lack of public successes, like we were just talking. I think if 10 companies come out tomorrow saying, hey, I just hit unicorn status and it's built on Bubble, then everyone it's going to validate Bubble and everyone will be building startups in Bubble. Because why not? They just saw 10 people raise $1 billion on a Bubble built startup that they built in like 3 to 6 months, and that they can move at crazy speeds and they have huge advantages. Why not? So I think that's really the big thing. Like no code at the moment might have this negative connotation saying like, oh, no code, it's like less powerful, right? Because it's not code, right? And I hate that. But the fact of the matter is I don't think we're escaping that name anytime soon. It's just so well branded across all tools that we're always going to have that. But I really do see it that it's very similar to the film industry where, in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, all major films were being shot on 35 millimeter film. It was just a superior look and quality at that time. So anytime you had a movie in the movie theaters, it was shot on 35 millimeter film. But 35 millimeter film came with a lot of disadvantages. It was really expensive, very time consuming, and could easily break, meaning like if you flash the capsule of film, all that film could get shot and burned or whatever, like just be bad, right? And it took time to review what you shot. Like you had to send it away to get processed so you could see dailies. The whole feedback side, everything, it was just a nightmare to work with. But the quality was so good, so you did it. I feel like that's traditional code, is 35 millimeters film, where it's really good quality. It just takes a long time to work with. It's a pain to manage, and it's very costly. And then enter digital cameras, right? Where in the 2000s it was like, yeah, it's so convenient, but the quality isn't there yet, right? So I'm still going to shoot on film because the quality is so much more. But now in 2022, digital cameras are the only cameras that are shot for all Hollywood movies and all theaters across the world, because the quality has caught up and has surpassed film. It is way more convenient. It is way more cost effective. It is way easier to work with. And now it's only digital being shot. You only shoot film when you just want to go back to like the olden days and like have that like retro, like, yo, I'm going to shoot film, but really no purpose, right? I think that's where we are right now, where no code is digital, traditional code is 35 millimeter film in this industry. I think it's going to take a while for no code to surpass that quality, but I do see that happening, and I do see all the other advantages of no code easily outweighing actually using code itself.
So, to anyone who just listened to that, it's very obvious you have experience in the film industry, right? And I know that you do. I also read you used to play hockey, right?
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I like to do as a thought experiment is to think back on past experiences to see how they've influenced the way that you think or act in your current role. Especially if your past experiences are like wildly different than what you're doing right now. So for example, what I studied in school was English literature and psychology. And I find whenever I'm not a designer, but whenever I have to think about like user journeys or just UI UX design in general, I guess, that part of me that loves analyzing and thinking about stories and psychology really gets activated and influences how I make those decisions now. I'm wondering, my question for you is, when you think back about your past experiences, because they seem very different to, not to say, I don't know how much time you spent playing hockey or how big of a part of your life it was, but let's say the experiences you had with sports and then going through and doing film and all the experiences you had there, what's one thing that you notice about yourself in your current role that you learned in a previous role? And it could be like a philosophy that you have, maybe an approach to handling different situations. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, like I've been very competitive my whole life, and that's probably because I played sports my whole life. I played hockey, lacrosse, soccer. I was in travel hockeys from the age 6 to 18. A lot of the people that I played with are in the NHL. I never had like the physical gift of being really big.
How far did you make it? I'm a huge hockey guy too.
I eventually was just the captain of my local high school team. And then I was on a AAA hockey travel team and whatnot my whole life. And so a lot of those folks went juniors, AHL, NHL. Not a lot, a handful, like 5 or 6, right? And so I was always competitive in that light. And then so I was a captain of my hockey team. But before that, I was a guild leader of WoW. So like the 13 to 14 to 15, I ran this big guild with another person, and we tackled and beat all of the game, right? So
this is World of Warcraft?
Yeah. Okay. And so I
Nice.
feel like I started building my leadership abilities with that game, right? Managing all these personalities, creating strategies, all that kind of stuff. And then it carried over into me as a captain of the hockey team. And then in college, I was a student body president, and I sat on the board of trustees there. I sat on their budget planning committees there, and I got to see how that organization at large worked. And then when I was in film school, I won a college Emmy Award, and I was leading a lot of film crews. And then right after film school, I created my own company. I was leading sets of 50 to 60 to 70 filmmakers and commercials, music videos, feature films. I was just always leading, right? And I think that's the through line here is I've always been a leader in some capacity, and I've always sought it out, right? Like when I got into college, like my goal wasn't to be a politician or anything like that, but I was like, it would be cool to be the president of the school, right? So I sought it out and I made it happen, right? And then when I went into film school, not many people were making feature films while also in film school, but I made 4 feature films while also in film school, doing both at the same time, right? And so that way, when I graduated, I had already so much industry experience that I was producing an Acura car commercial the week of graduation and hiring the people that I graduated with, right? And so I was always going out there and just making it happen because, well, one, I mean, I financially supported myself my whole way, and so I needed to go out and make money. Like that was the way I paid for everything, right? And that kind of hard work and was instilled into everything. And I knew that, like, when I originally applied to film schools, I didn't get into anything, and so I knew that I needed to really go out there and make it happen myself. And so I originally applied to USC, UCLA, all that kind of stuff from a 4-year degree. That didn't happen, so I ended up going to community school. And in order to get in those film schools, I know I needed to really step up my game. And so I joined the Honor Society. I was a student body president. I was all these kind of things. Eventually graduated with a really high honors GPA. Got into USC, got into Chapman. Had those options available to me, but only after they weren't. And I knew that I needed to work really hard to get there because I wanted to get there, right? And so I think it's just a lot of all of those things coming together to where I am now that allows me to be a leader, but also allows me to understand the tech that we're building extremely well. The startup that I built in 2017, I was a first-time non-technical founder. I had to go raise angel investment. I raised like $230,000 from 15 different angels. I was pitching all the time. I was managing development teams of like 5 to 10 in and out part-time, also design teams. I was running the product there. Like I got boots on the ground founder experience of, what that was worth for 2 years, and really have combined everything into where I am now to, hopefully run this team and be very successful with it.
Where did that drive come from for you? It's interesting to hear you talk about it because it's so like obvious just from the way that you're speaking about your past experiences that it's like been there in everything that you've done. But did it like develop when you started playing sports? Did your parents have a big role in like cultivating that in you, or was it just like something you felt inside? Where did that come from?
It wasn't always there. Like, I was a really bad student in high school and elementary school. Like, I just was a jock, right? I only played sports and I competed in those sports, but I didn't care about school until like junior year of high school, where all of my friends got into really good universities and I got into nothing. And that was like my first like big like failure in life. From that moment on, I was a straight A student and was a straight A student through my high school year, every year in college, etc. Like, because I knew that nothing, that was my first time that I realized nothing that was really going to be given to me just because my name is JJ kind of thing, right? And I think that was the moment that sparked everything of like, if I'm going to do this, I got to go out there and do it myself. And there was a lot of failures along the way, a lot of, learning moments, like some stuff that were like just really hard moments in life that, didn't work well, but I was able to, take them as learning out circumstances and implement that knowledge into what I do now.
Awesome. Last question for you. So you've mentioned that you have two kids. One of them is just arrived, right? What, 4 months, 5 months old? 4 months old. Okay. So what would you say is one thing that you've learned from the experience of being a new father, or father in general, let's say, that has affected your professional life?
Yeah, being a dad's really hard. It's like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm still struggling with it, even though I have a second kid. I know what to do, but mentally and physically, it's really difficult, especially these infant ages. It's very difficult on me. But it's a constant thing that I'm aware of, that I work through with my wife, and I continuously try to be the best version of myself each day. But I think how I instill it into what I do now, I think, empathy and just passion and compassion for, the people that I'm working with, and understanding that everyone is in different circumstances in life and doing their own thing, understanding how hard it is to be a parent and to be a working professional, understanding all of those things and just having more patience with that, is probably the biggest thing that I've learned. I'm also always caring for people, so I think that maybe stems into my leadership and like understanding how other people, of course, have feelings too, and they're in certain circumstances, and maybe they need some time to find that home work-life balance. Like, that's been a big thing for me, is finding that work-life balance in the last 3, 4, or 5 years. And I think I've gotten to a decent point, and now I'm trying to help my team members also reach that point, because I know that once you get there, you find so much more fulfillment in life, and it also frees you up to really excel at the things you need to do when you need to do it, but to not be burnt out and to not feel things that you might be missing out on because you're not having that healthy work-life balance. So I think just some of those things.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm 32, and a lot of my friends are starting to have kids. A couple of close friends, I had this conversation with, I asked them, what's the one thing that has changed, one perspective change that you've had since you've become a new father? And both of them said the same thing in terms of just like increased levels of empathy towards other people. So that's interesting, and it makes sense. I can understand that. It makes sense to me, at least. Anyways, JJ, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It has been a blast. JJ, you just released a course on called SaaS Camp for Build Camp. I'll link to that in the description below. You founded No Code Alliance. You're working on 50 million other things and are all over the community. So I'll link to all of your socials and stuff below. But thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate the time. And if anyone is interested in getting the no code, now is the time. We're just at the beginning, and it's only going to go up from here. So good luck on your journey.
Hell yeah. Let's do it. All right. See you, everyone. Bye-bye.